Salutations everyone, welcome to another Overwatch 2 video where today we're going to be talking about Brigitte, a character with quite the checkered past and how she has been viewed in her strength and counterplay against her throughout the years. A lot of people have really hated on Brig, especially in the GOATS meta. A lot of people like to say that she enabled the GOATS meta when it was actually the other way around. The GOATS meta enabled Brigitte because you had to have 3 tanks. That's kind of like the whole point behind it. But anyways, I think she's in a good spot now where no one's gonna really have an issue with her. Obviously, we don't know what the new rally ultimate is going to be. That has been announced that they are changing the ultimates, which I kind of get. You know, maybe now with the changes to where just overheal is overheal. It's a bit redundant with the beat drop. So they want to make it a bit more different. I don't know what they're going to do with it. I don't think they would add damage or speed or anything like that. It's still going to be a supportive thing and probably AoE as well. So we'll see. And obviously that's going to change how viable the character may be. But her rally in the first and second beta is pretty decent. It's not one of the best support ultimates, and it's not the worst. So it's good enough. It's good enough. They don't need to change it to make the character work, or to nerf her down or buff her up or anything like that. So the way that healers are in Overwatch 2 is much different. Yes, the biggest difference is the fact that we only have 1 tank instead of 2. But I would say the next biggest change is the roles that our healers are playing. Whereas before, we had, the main tank and the off tank. You had the main healer, and then you had the flex support, and then you had hit skins and, projectiles, blah, blah, blah. That one doesn't really work as much because it's all about, DPS is easy, plug and play. You can kind of play whatever you want, whenever you want, for the most part, and it'll work. But for supports, you needed to have a main support and your flex support, right? You wouldn't want, even though it did work at Overwatch League levels, you wouldn't want Brig Zen, right? There was an Overwatch League meta where that did work because teamwork and cooldown operations and things like that, and not feeding or trickling in, they can make something like that work. But the point is, those are 2 low heal output characters, especially if it wasn't something where Brig is really strong for every player, like she is right here. Control, King of the Hill maps, close quarters. Everyone's in her range. She can whip shot. She can flail. She can bash. That's where she could output the most inspire damage. She could stay up and in the fight and proc inspire the most. That's when she can put out your main heal amount of heal, which a decent benchmark for previous iterations of Overwatch. It would be 1,000 heals a minute. 10k healing in 10 minutes, something like that. That's what we would expect from a main healer, right? Your Moiras, your Mercies, your Annas, if everything's working right, where, that would always be the case. But in Overwatch 2, we've kind of lost main healer flex support. It's just kind of people will still say flex support, especially when they're talking about Overwatch League players, but there's no main healer, off healer anymore. You're all just healers now. You're all just healers. Lucio's gap between how much healing he would put out on a match versus, say, Mercy's is kind of gone. Obviously he has that damage and the boop utility to, contribute more to the fight than just a pure heal bot beam. But the point is, he's going to be in the fight a lot more, and he can output more healing even with 1 less tank. That's kind of an interesting thing. Obviously supports aren't getting nearly as many ultimates as before, but their healing output isn't diminishing as much as maybe we would think. Obviously we do only have 1 tank, but that 1 tank is staying up a lot more often, and regardless of what the kind of tank it is, it's going to need support. They can't just operate on their own, right? So playing something that wouldn't have worked support duo wise in Overwatch 1 can work in Overwatch 2, just because of the way that fights are happening, how they're evolving, and how characters are interacting with one another. So we really don't have to worry about, oh boy, I hope that Brig or Zen switches to Moira or Mercy or whatever, or oh man, that Lucio's not enough, better switch to the Fox Girl character, you know, whatever we have in the future. I don't think that's something we really have to worry about. Whereas I think Brig is more plug and playable in a lot more instances, as I mentioned in my tier list. She's not going to be as good in some things, but she's going to be better in other things. So she's definitely feels new, and in many ways I would say improved, because she doesn't have to be in these huge close quarters battles in order to get the kind of value that we look to get from her. She can facilitate a role that is needed when it comes to the anti-dive, right? A Winston jumping in, a Doomfist, a Wrecking Ball slamming in, right? She can kind of grant that space to where, you know, things are uncoordinated, nobody's in comms, you're an honor, right? The Winston can easily just walk past your entire team, both your DPS and your tank, and then just dive on you. And there's nothing you can do because your teammates aren't helping you, right? Your tank isn't turning around, your DPS aren't doing what they need to be doing. Brig can save you. That's the counterplay right there. When, you know, Overwatch players, you know, they love ignoring a Wrecking Ball running around. They love ignoring a Winston jumping in. They love ignoring a Pharah in the air, a Soldier on high ground, a Cassidy flanking behind the entire team. You know, that takes 2 minutes to do. People love ignoring that kind of stuff because they're like, I can't be bothered. You know, they're not easy to kill. Blah blah. I'm just gonna ignore it and hope it fixes itself. Brig is kind of the best companion to have in those situations where our supports are very vulnerable if they do not have movement abilities, like say your Ana or your Zen. And Brig, you know, was always decent at babysitting then, but now I feel like it's a lot more needed in those cases, and is a lot more central to where that might not have been the case, because it's so much easier to do. Where, you know, DPS, they've always kind of been able to do whatever they want, whenever they want, right? Well, now in Overwatch 2, they kind of know that a bit more. Now that there's only one tank, and a D.Va can't, like, dive to shut them down, or defense matrix in their face, or a Zarya bubbling some damage away, right? So our supports are a lot more vulnerable than ever before, and people are taking advantage of it more so than they ever did in the past, when they always had an advantage, right? People are playing a lot more aggressive because they know they can get away with it more so now than they did in the past. So Brigitte is pretty good with that. She's not as good as on the front line as she used to be, where it's like Brig and her tank against, you know, the enemy tank and whatever supports they have. She's not as good in that. She can't fight a tank. The tanks are way too tanky now, and she doesn't have the stun to, you know, mess with some cooldowns and some things like that, right? That is just not in her kit any longer. But she does have the trade-off to where, let's say, like a Mercy Guardian's Angels to her tank, and you're with your tank trying to help, you know, provide some Inspire healing and some damage to help close that gap and win the tank battle, because that's all Overwatch has ever been, will ever be about. It's about the tank battle. That is the way that the fights are won and lost, is the tank battle. And whereas before she could help with, you know, some boopage and some stuns and some damage and her sustainability, she can't do that right now. But like I said, Mercy she Guardian Angels in. Maybe she slingshots a bit too far. You hit a shot, a flail, and then boom, shield bash kills her. No longer stuns her till we have to have some follow-up damage or hope your teammate does something. It can kill her, right? Someone gets a bit too greedy, the Morris fades off a cooldown, or your tank, the enemy tank isn't getting enough heals, and your other healer is doing their part, right? Or your damage dealers are just doing too much damage for their 1 or 2 supports to handle. You can help bridge that gap and take advantage of things. That's her outplay, is to punish the over-aggression and do a little bit of chunk damage, right? She's gonna have constant healing. She's gonna be healing more and more consistently in Overwatch 2 than in Overwatch 1. She doesn't have to use her Inspire to heal herself. Her shield retains a bit more value now, to where you get out of the line of sight, you use the shield to get around cover, you get those precious seconds for that roll passive to kick in for you to get your self-healing. So she's going to have her shield up a lot more. Losing the shield, yes, she becomes a lot less useful. She can't use the bash for damage or for distance. And obviously she can't use the shield to protect herself. So she's never going to be too strong, I feel. She's not going to be a character you can just rush in. You might have seen that in the beginning of the video here. I kind of went a little bit too aggro. You can't really do that as much in as many circumstances. She's going to be able to get a bit more damage out there with the shield bash doing some flat damage like it did right there against the Ryan that over-aggressed, and we punished him for it. Also, like, he had like 0 support, and here comes our Reinhardt here to clean up. But you can just kind of see the outplay here, because it's Ryan v Ryan, and they have Lucio and Mercy, I think it was, and we got me. And I'm keeping the Reinhardt up and helping him win that fight, and we're just gonna win based off of that lone formula right there. If I can get my Reinhardt to be in a better position than their Reinhardt, their DPS need to pop the heck off, or it's just not gonna happen. And I get a bit of help there. This was actually a game of the first beta. If this was the second beta after the patch, I would have died right there because of the nerf that Armor got. Armor got another nerf if you weren't paying attention. So yeah, a Rhine pin will now one-shot Brig in like every single circumstance, as opposed to just some beforehand, just because the nerf to like Armor, it can't like gate as much damage once it's at a lower health threshold than before. So Brig's in a good spot. She can do the anti-dive of whipping away the Winston that keeps jumping in, or the Doomfist, and she can whip shot the Junker Queen away and mitigate her threat range, where she has to be up close to get that bleed damage, to get that shotgun damage. And you know, Brig can't 1v1 her. She shouldn't be fighting her, but you know, a swing and a thwip get her out of range, then you bash away to get the distance. We did get a bit more distance with the shield bash now, which I think is really good. So where she was strong of being like super duper tanky, although I think she's still a good nano target as a Ana player. If I don't have a good nano target like Blade or Visor or, you know, Winston, and our Brig's there in the front line, I'll nano the Brig. Keep her up. Her Inspire will always be triggering, and it'll help our tank or whomever she's fighting with. So she's still a good nano target, but she's not as tanky, and she lost the stun. So I feel like where she was the most oppressive, she's not going to be as oppressive. And with the changes to her damage and the roll passive, where she wasn't good, she's not going to be as bad as before. So she's going to be a bit more plug and play, and a counter pick. You're going to have to switch a lot more in Overwatch 2 than you did in Overwatch 1, and you needed to switch a lot in Overwatch 1 if you were going to play correctly against what the threat was. Say the Doomfist is destroying you, sleep dart that bitch, right? The FAR is up in the air, uncontested. You gotta hit scan her in the head, right? Tracer or Genji's coming at your backline, you whip shot that motherfucker, right? You shield bash him away, you make him dash out, use their cooldowns, keep your friends up. That's what Brig's here for, and she's pretty good at it now.